Namaste, everyone, and welcome to tonight's masterclass with Jeffrey Armstrong. Tonight's topic is Why Jyotish Matters in a Modern World. Tonight's format is going to be a little different than normal. I'm going to ask Jeffrey some questions about astrology. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Sandy Graham, and I'm co-director of VASA, Vedic Academy of Science and Arts, and I've been working with Jeffrey for almost 30 years now. And when I first met him, he was a corporate speaker. And I, after subsequently found out he was also a Jyotish. I didn't know what that was. I couldn't figure out why a corporate speaker, a man with 3 degrees, a photographic memory, wanted to be an astrologer. I used to call them horoscopes. So after speaking with him and watching him do over 50 of my clients and friends, he completely turned me around about Vedic astrology, which I had never heard of. And today we're going to ask him some questions and find out about this amazing science. Please welcome Jeffrey Armstrong. Jeffrey G.
Yes, Sandy.
Would you like to open the talk first by maybe giving us an idea of how you got into Vedic astrology and the difference between that and Western astrology, briefly?
Yes. So I always begin Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo, Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat, Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. In relationship to the culture of India, I have had 3 actual persons who accepted me as their student and became my guru. The first was of Vedanta, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who started and initiated me into the science of Vedanta. But the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad Purana, the Mahabharata, all those texts. Then, next, after I was in the ashram for 5 years, I came out, but I had previously been a Western astrologer. So I found a guru of Vedic astrology, which is a very different system than Western astrology for a number of reasons, which we may touch on later. But for now, just trust me, the Vedic system is the source, and it got perverted and twisted as it went to the Western cultures. And then finally, the Sanskrit itself, I had a professor of Sanskrit who taught me the language. Now, with that in mind, we're going to discuss tonight the relationship of Jyotish, or Vedic astrology, and not only what it was to ancient texts and how it existed and still does, but as Sandy said, how it is relevant and matters to our life in the modern world.
Thank you. It's a good introduction. Jeffrey, people are so busy in the world today. Why would somebody want to consult an astrologer in the first place? I mean, aren't they masters of their own destiny? Aren't they in charge of their own life? Don't they make their own life happen? I mean, what do the planets got to do with it?
That's a great question, Sandy. The first answer that came to me was my first degree was psychology. And in spite of all the scientific advances in the world, there were still a lot of crazy people who were driven crazy by forces that they could not understand. And when I finally was introduced to the Vedic knowledge, I had been an astrologer before that, without an introduction to the Vedic astrology. I had been a Western astrologer using the wrong calculations, as all Western astrologers do, and using information that was for only one lifetime. But this is the premise behind the Vedic civilization, that all of us are immortal beings who cannot die. And we are visiting a realm where everything must, where we go from body to body. So the simplest way to think of Jyotish is that our previous lives are still having reactions in our current life. Think of it as a kind of echo of what we did before. And the moment we land on Matubhumi and leave, that is to say, leave the womb of our mother and officially are here, that moment marks the unfolding of our karma, which was also going to be delivered on a timetable. This is why Jyotish is called Kala Shastra, the science of time.
So your premise is that we have multiple births and reincarnations. So if somebody just believes in one lifetime, that doesn't absolve them from getting the karma. So when a client comes to you, no matter what their belief system is, you would look at that chart and be able to see their karma this lifetime. Is that correct?
Yes, and they usually come in duress, which is quite ironic, but it matches because in Sanskrit, one who doesn't know they have more than one life is called Duratma, narrow-minded, small-minded, and one who sees the big picture is called Mahatma or Mahatma. We all in Western world learned that word from Mahatma Gandhi, but we didn't know what it really meant until later when we had proper gurus come and show us the science of karma. So first my Vedanta guru, because Vedanta rests upon that as the solution to being here and staying in the right consciousness. And then from my Jyotish guru, he incorporated that into the momentum we created in our previous lives and how the birth chart is showing us the unfolding of those karmas over time.
I think one of the amazing things that that turned me around was how you, in the very beginning, when we didn't have Skype or Zoom or whatever, could look at a person's chart and then tell them what they looked like over the telephone. I mean, that was just shocking to me that their karma written on their body is their karma this lifetime, and you can actually see it in a piece of paper. I mean, I found that very phenomenal. And I guess, and I remember you saying once that some people get the pleasure body and some people not so much. So our karmas sort of are encapsulated in ourselves, I guess. Is that correct, or can you say it in a better way?
Well, I can add to what you said, which is excellent, that it's a kind of where was I? So if you think of it as a continuity, which we don't at first because the propaganda for most of our planet, with a few exceptions, is one lifetime. So astrology makes no sense if there's one lifetime because it's just some random things happening to us. But if it's not that, then we can actually come to understand what the weather is doing, how it's changing, which planet is coming to have a larger influence for how long a period of time, because it's a science of cause and effect over thousands of years. And the horoscope
Clarify
tells you,
the link with Ayurveda. I understand they're sister sciences. What's the link between Jyotish and Ayurveda?
well, they're sister sciences. Ayus is the life force. So if you take pulses and if you look at various other physiological symptoms from a particular perspective, you can say what's happening to the person and even predict for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years how their body will behave by having your hands on it. That is Ayurveda, where the body as a manifestation is unfolding in various ways that can be understood and reinforced and supported. Now, the blueprint for that is the part that's been missing in Western civilization. Even their astrology had no concept of reincarnation. It was just something that happened when you were born at a certain moment. But in fact, according to Jyotish, our past is just waiting for us to be mature enough in the next body so it can unfold. And the positions of the planets at birth tell the big story about that. And the changing of the planet's relationship to each other over time is the signal that certain downloads of karma are about to take place. And that's where prediction comes in. We can predict which karma is being downloaded to us, when, at what rate, in what company, in what departments. And that's what's unique about Jyotish.
I've seen you predict people's marriages, when they're going to marry, when they're going to divorce, when a health situation may be challenging, or I remember even someone came at stage 4 cancer and everybody said that was it for them. And you said, no, they're going to pull out of it. And in fact, they did. Things like that I found just so phenomenal in a chart that karma is actually practically a printout to someone who understands the science.
Yes. And we have a saying for that process. It's a seer. Somebody who sees something that you wouldn't expect was able to be seen. And of course, people supporting a one life only worldview would find it quite remarkable that someone could know about what's going to happen because they don't have the constant frame of past and unfolding the future. In a very interesting way, the Vedic astrology, the planets in Jyotish, the grahas, they're called, the word graha gave us the English word gravity. And think of the word gravity, G-R-A-V. The word grab something came from the English word gravity. V and B are interchangeable as a sound. So gravity has grabbed us, and we're in the grip of Mother Earth, Mata Bhumi, according to Sanskrit. So gravity. And that gravity actually goes in phases and in chapters and through procedures and processes, downloading particular things. And that's the part that only the Vedic system of Vedic astrology, Jyotish. And Jyotish means, by the way, the science of light, because all of those grahas, the 9 planets, all give off light. And by watching the timing and patterning of that light, the karma that's being downloaded to the person can be seen. Now, it's important to remember one thing. We do have free will. But with that free will, we can't change our past. We can't change what's going to be delivered. But we can change what we do about it and how we react. And so this is a science, the science of past, present, and future.
Richard, you had a question?
Thank you, Jeffrey G. What just came to mind when you were explaining this was before industrialization, everyone on the planet lived under the stars. And the stars were our markers in time. Can you speak to that?
Yes, indeed they were. So we certainly were more star user friendly. But that's only seeing them as the lights in our environment. But we really didn't understand the crucial thing. And this was because the Abrahamic religions denied this. Angels are fluffy little creatures that fly around and do things for God at certain times. But in the Veda, the entirety of this universe is being run by a work crew called Devas and Devis. And each one of them has a department and is a department head. In other words, the administration of a universe, what to speak of one of our lives, is intertwined with a very large group of beings who are Atmas like us, but they're living as a Deva. They're managing life while we are trying to figure it out from within. They did that in a previous life. And now they're Devas or Devis. And so we too could aspire and eventually become that. What no one can become is the Supreme Being. Krishnastu, Bhagavan Svayam. So getting to know Jyotish is part of getting to know the beings who are in charge of life on behalf of the Supreme Being. And the Vedic culture is the only one that developed that to such level of sophistication. But we know the Greeks did because Christianity objected to it and said, no, 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 there's only one, as if it was some kind of problem. But Jyotish doesn't make it a competition. It means they're department heads. And they're all working for the one supreme and ultimate being. And they're all part of a system that is delineated in the Vedic Shastras very deeply and profoundly. So Veda is a Veda Anga. It's called a limb of the Veda. In other words, it's one of the sciences that helps you understand everything with more exact precision and explains things in a department of the reality that we're in the midst of.
Jeffrey, if we could backtrack a little bit here before it will sort of enhance Richard's question a little bit, but could you explain the astronomical difference between the sidereal and the Western system, just for the listeners who are not here today, so in the future they'll know why these two systems are different?
Well, rather than go into too much detail, I'll just
briefly
say the calculations that are used are either sidereal or they're tropical, which means, simply put, if you just look at the Earth and sort of look at the stars and planets, then that doesn't give you the correct understanding. Whereas if you understand that the planets are, and their positioning, carriers of, or the timing of, indicators of cause and effect that we brought with us that is just waiting to unfold, not only for individuals, but for whole civilizations, for whole generations. And there are a myriad of ways that you can look at time. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Kalohismin. The Supreme Being says, when I manifest in matter, I manifest as time. And Jyotish is the science of time. Western astrology is trying to predict a one lifetime person's future in this planet on one life, in the one they're in. It doesn't see their past and it doesn't see their future, Western astrology. But Vedic astrology is right in the midst of all of that, with relationships with all the devas and devis and the ultimate supreme being, Bhagavan, and with a science that is timed exactly to the birth of the person and understands that different karmas are unfolding. Now, here's the next part. But also knows the names of the beings, the planets, the grahas, the ones who give us gravity, that is to say, who grab us and give us karma. I call it gravity, because they grab us and give us a download of cause and effect. Western astrology does not see that, because they only see one lifetime, even astrologers. So there's no real explanation for what's happening. You didn't create it because you weren't there.
Can you explain why then someone is one sign in sidereal and another sign in tropical?
The wobbling of our planet's pole is called procession of the equinoxes. It not only is the pole of the planet drawing a circle in the sky over 25,920 years for one cycle. So just think of that. One lifetime, religions don't even imagine 25,920 years as a cycle. But as the planet goes through that cycle, then all of its astronomical motions shift slowly throughout that timetable. And this means that the planets as we see them from Mata Bhumi, from Mother Earth, shift their position in time, in the seasons, in the place we are on the planet, and they do that on a grand scale. And if we don't know how to take it into consideration, and remember, astronomy wasn't as sophisticated then as it is with electron microscopes now. So this had to be understood in very sophisticated ways. So this sidereal astrology tracks the movements of the stars as the Earth goes through a 25,920-year cycle. So they know how to divide that by the time you're in right now and use those calculations, because from where you're calculating, from where you are on the planet, it will look different because of this precession of the equinoxes over 25,920 years. In other words, the calculations, the planets are staying the same, but where you're calculating from, what time in history you're in a 25,000-year cycle, all have to be taken into consideration in order to be accurate with a particular group of stars. So this is the difference, that level of sophistication and precision does not exist in Western astrology.
So I guess I was trying to get you to say that the Western astrology isn't using the actual star positions.
I did say it, but I perhaps was a little too detailed. That's what I said.
It's
They're not-
23 degrees off from the actual positions of the stars.
Well, how much they're off changes from year to year.
Mm.
And that's the point. So they're 23 degrees and 54 minutes or something like that off right now. But that will increase and increase and increase. The gap of their ignorance is getting bigger all the time. Hey.
Right. So what is it? What did you say? Every 26,000 years or 25,000?
25,920 years for
Right.
one yuga cycle.
So the pole star will shift.
One
and
wobble
everything.
of the pole of the Earth
Okay.
takes 25,920 years and
Now,
really changes our measurements.
to get back to Ayurveda now, each of the planets is a dosha, is that right? Each one is Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And do you want to explain how it's possible that you can actually see the body type? Or will you be giving away a secret?
Oh, I don't mind sharing them. You have to be ready to receive it. And if you are, then it's your karma to hear it this time and not forget it. Or even get so interested you do something about it. But Kalohi Smin, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I am time. So as we discuss this, it's a very interesting thing to think about, that the Supreme Being who came to earth as a Purna or complete avatar, meaning the whole enchilada, the whole person came down twice, as Ram and Sita in the Ramayana, and as Krishna and Radha and the rest of his associates in the Mahabharata. Mahabharata 7,000 years ago, Ramayana maybe 14,000 years ago. But these are complete descents of the person who's in charge of everything, not even just our universe, everything. And that person comes down on the planet. Now, the reason that's relevant to what we're talking about is we're talking about personhood. Animals cannot grasp this discussion because they're just eat, sleep, mate, and defend, protecting the body they're inhabiting. But humans who don't know this are unaware of the karmic delivery schedule. So think of it this way. Think that you ordered pizzas in your last 100 lifetimes. You ordered everything from pizza to everything else, and you earned it. Sign then said, you have to work and do the following to own this. Okay. And then you own it, but now you can't receive it. Well, now the universe owes you. So in your next life, there's an IOU going on, but you don't know it, and you don't know the timetable. But Jyotish does. Jyotish can look at your birth chart and see which planets are delivering what now by their position in different star groups. And it's called sidereal. It is that as they move through the stars, they become a deliverer of a particular reality to particular individuals according to their receptivity. In other words, their chart. So this becomes a very sophisticated, before we even had satellites, we knew that the grahas were satellites downloading cause and effect from 100 lifetimes ago, from 50 lifetimes ago. If it's got your name on it, it's going to get downloaded. I even named it UPS, Universal Parcel System. The planets are the universal parcel system. Whatever you deserve and requested or earned by your actions, you don't have a choice. Once you've done it, it's yours, and it's going to come to you in a future life. Unless you can prevent that somehow. And that's for later on. Till you can talk to the devas, till you can understand the system, till you can behave in such a way that you even erase past events or minimize them. So just, if you will, hold the thought of our universe that we're living in, and all universes, as the backdrop of conscious entities who are delivering cause and effect as part of their responsibility. They're the ones who do that. Whereas when you're in a human body, so we could become a deva someday after finishing being humans, or we might have been a deva in a past life and decided to try human again. But these are postures from which we see time, we act, and get consequences. We have a relationship with the ultimate and supreme person. As you hear this, you can see how much more sophisticated it is than so-called religion. They don't go anywhere near explaining event, cause and effect, how it's related to us, how it's ours on a delivery cycle. So I call it UPS, Universal Parcel System. We all have a package coming with our name on it, but we're not sure what or when, unless we use Jyotish. Then Jyotish will say what and when. That's the best way to think of it. What is coming, when it's coming, and then we understand that we were the doer for creating that karma, but someone else, the devas and devis, are the doer of delivering that karma. And the 9 planets, the 9 grahas, the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu, Ketu. So there are 9 grahas, which means grabbing us. And they grab us and they download the consequence of something we did before.
Could you give us like an example what you mean by that? I mean, how does, give us a particular planet that would grab somebody and give them a certain kind of karma?
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Well, first of all, let's just say,
like, what do you mean grab? How does today's person understand if a planet grabs you?
well, isn't it interesting? Because that's where the word grab came from the
No,
Sanskrit.
you said that, but I mean, in reality.
And so the planet has a hold of us. It has grabbed us. Now, if it's just the planet that has a hold of us, that's not very interesting. But if we have a past, and the past has to be delivered while the planet still has a grab or a hold on us, and we're interacting with potentially thousands of people, millions of people here. So just do the math and just think of the rock stars or the famous actors and actresses. They've influenced hundreds of millions of people often. Now, just imagine the cause and effect that's set up by that. Technically speaking, whatever the actor or actress did that had an influence on someone is a karma. There's an effect that goes back to the person who had the influence. And they're thinking, oh, I got rich making movies. Yes, you did, but you also got karma, massive karma, because whatever people do watching your movie, you are responsible.
So it sounds like you're saying the more we engage with the material world, or the more desires that we have, or the more desires that remain unfulfilled, keep coming back in our next lifetime. In other words, we just keep repeating this process until we don't have those desires anymore. Is that right?
Yes, and you've heard the saying, what goes around comes around. And so that's an excellent, though not detailed, description of what's happening. Is that whatever we do is one of two things. It was new free will that we just used, or it was really just us exerting free will. Or it's the unfolding of the use of free will that happened in the past lives and is now surfacing. And with Jyotish, we can see the difference between the two. Because I can't predict what you will do precisely, because you're still the decider. But you're not the decider when the universe gives you the result of your past actions. You're the recipient. And so, with Jyotish, with Vedic astrology, you can see the causal chains and their timetable for unfoldment and the subject matter that is unfolding. All of that already exists. It's on record. And the planets and stars are actually a sophisticated way of keeping track of what we're downloading to a planet like this, Mata Bhumi. It's a big scale of reality to hold in your mind and really understand.
I think it's so profound, because so many times clients will say to me afterwards, I have no idea how he knew that. How did he know that? Nobody knows that. How did he know that? And yet these karmas seem so, like, I guess if it's a big karma, it's very obvious in the chart to you. Whereas it might be something, I mean, we have, people have fears and trauma and, sexual trauma and family trauma, and, they might lose a child, and all of these things that I've heard that you see in a chart. It's quite shocking to a person who is the first time client. Um, how do you see that?
Well, I'll add one thing to that. When you've been a Jyotishi for long enough, you begin, by knowing people's charts, to dream their karma. Because dreaming is just a pretend boundary between so-called awake and so-called asleep. But you can learn to inhabit those states of consciousness, sleeping and waking, by the actions you do and by changing your consciousness, and that's called yoga. So it's also called psychology, sukeologia. It is us either haphazardly and not very professionally interacting with the past and creating a future, or it's us cultivating a relationship with the devas and devis. And we haven't spoken of this, but it's necessary, because we can speak to them by chanting mantras to them. And there are those 9 grahas each has a name, each has a vibration, each has a mantra, each can be reached directly. And by whatever, and then just think, the rule is, in Sanskrit, whatever you associate with, you become like.
But your average client isn't going to come and say, Jeffrey, what are the mantras to the 9 planets? They're not going to chant them. They really just want to know, as you've often said, when am I getting laid and when am I getting paid? They're pretty much at the basic level of just tell me what's going to happen. Somebody typed a question in, which I'd like to ask, which is a good one. It says, can we escape the karmas by knowing the potential karmas that are predicted in our chart? So is there a way around it?
Right. Well, in a similar way, If you know you have a tendency to get addicted to certain things, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that you should avoid those things. But if you then complain, but I'm already addicted, then the answer is, well, is there any you left that can choose not to do that, not to be addicted? Or think of it another way, if somebody loses a limb of their body, there's no getting it back. You've got a phony now. You've got from the knee down, it's not you. It's something that just keeps you from falling over. Now that karma is difficult to go back and change, and to get a leg sewn on that functions properly, that will act as a part of you. So this is interesting for both the client and the astrologer, because the astrologer starts having dreams that are the result of the knowledge of the client. Instead of just having your own, you actually, and now this is a yogic understanding, if you leave your body in the right state of consciousness, you can enter someone else's. And you can also be directly in touch with other beings, the ones that are running the cosmos. That in our civilization, we don't accept these things and we don't practice them. What the Vedic culture does in the secret is Sanskrit as a language and what are called mantras, yantras, the Shastra, that's all in Sanskrit. So these are doorways or lines of connectedness. So think of it that way, that yoga means having a steady connection. With whom? With Sri Bhagavan. Who's Sri Bhagavan? Well, the sloppy English word is God. But God is just a sloppy English word. You've heard me say why. Most of you have. You should remember, what is the hutam, gutam, gut, God. But that's not Bhagavan. Bhagavan is a scientific Sanskrit word that says, the person who's the source of all desirable reality. Okay, now let's think about this. So when we come back, each lifetime, we bring with us a distant memory, which is already being acted upon by the devas and devis, who are downloading our karma to us by arranging our circumstances. And then it's the use your free will part. We're still using our free will. We're not finished. That's the point of coming back, not just to receive more karma, but to actually use our free will in such a way that we can change our karma and redirect ourselves in terms of our ultimate destination. This is, see how much bigger a view that is than a one lifetime religion? And I'm never disrespectful to religion. They're sincere. They're trying to talk to the Supreme Being. Good, keep it up. But if you really want to do that, you need a language designed for that, Sanskrit. You need a galactic understanding that there are beings working for the Supreme Being who are the deliverers of your karma, who will be bringing it to you on a timetable. The deeper you go into this, the more you really come to understand it. Then a lot of fun things happen. But one that some people do is they start trying to tell the planets what to do because they're a human. So they think they're in charge. So they say, I want you to do the following, and then da, 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 da.
Well, it's more like, give me this, give me that. Everybody loves Lakshmi and everybody loves,
Well, it's also do this to the person I
Yeah.
don't do that. It's giving them orders.
Maybe this is a good moment to bring up upaya, because when you look at a chart, you see certain strengths and weaknesses in a chart. And I've often told clients, if the one thing you get out of this chart reading is what is the Achilles heel in the chart, what is the one thing that you can, if you fixed it, would change your karma. So maybe you could talk a little bit about upaya to some of the planets, just so that it sort of goes back to the question that someone in the audience asked. If knowing these things are potential problems, how can we mitigate them?
Yes, it's a great question. In other words, We can either go up or we can go oops. Upaya.
Ha.
Because we can do something to rectify and remedy places where we're imbalanced. So what all of this is also resting upon is a universal table of value. Just like the atomic table of elements that physicists used here. And with that, they understand the number of electrons and the behaviors of a particular element and what it does under certain circumstances. Well, that's exactly what Jyotish is. But with Jyotish, when you land in your next body and you start out as a young child, then the first thing we can do is look at the sky at that moment. Make the diagram and put the planets in the sign they're in, and then watch the unfoldment of time for the next duration of a lifetime, 100 years, whatever it is. And now look and see the sequence of unfoldment. It's as if everyone has a story that they're carrying with them, but they don't know what it's going to be. And they don't even necessarily desire what it is because they don't know what it is. They may think they have desires that are coming from their body, but that doesn't mean that the karma that they're going to receive, no matter what they do, and this is an interesting part, some cause and effect can be changed because it's a tendency. So if you have a tendency that creates an outcome, you could change the action.
Like a craving for sweets or something that's
Yeah.
negative, or
Like a habit, like any kind of, like addiction. We're all addicted to being us, what we call us. But what if that's not us? So what if that addiction could be changed? That's called upaya. We could go up.
or if you don't have a strength in a certain area and you won't, like if you don't like exercise or you don't like confrontation, those sort of tendencies.
All kinds.
Yeah.
And this is why it's so interesting as a science, because all the archetypes, all the prototypes, all the behaviors and what they will lead to and equal are sketched out in these sciences so that it's literally a universal worldview rather than just a little narrow one lifetime worldview. It's the big picture there, and they are running downloads for millions and billions of humans. The animal kingdom could be humans that went backwards or could be on their way forward and haven't been human yet. But the scale of this is what makes what's called a Mahatma. If your Atma can see on this scale and does on a regular basis, then when you see someone, you don't believe what they appear to be. You believe what their chart says they have been. You see inside things that they may not even be showing you, demonstrating, or acting out at that moment. But you also see a timetable of the unfolding of the cause and effect that they're bringing with them. And as a result, all of these variables are what a Jyotishi, a Vedic astrologer, is in dealing with. Now, here's a big secret. First thing my guru of Jyotish said to myself and a friend who were taking it with him, we would both had been Western astrologers before. We just spent 5 years in an ashram, becoming yogis. And then we met our astrology guru. And he said that whatever you say to others with this knowledge, you'll take their karma if you tell them what to do. Because if you tell them what to do, then you're the cause. And so this is a real kicker, isn't it? Because
Well, people come to you asking for advice. They want you to tell them what to do. So that's a pretty fancy dance you have to do.
it is, because they want you to tell them what to do so you get the karma, not them. But they don't even know that they want that, but they intuitively want that. They want someone else to make the decision. So what should I do, Guruji? Yeah, right. Well, here's your choices. Here's the consequence of this. Here's the consequence of that. Here's what this leads to. Here's the inevitability of that. And here, look at these characteristics. That's Jupiter. So here's one of the first things you'll learn. If there are 9 planets, and there are, then there are 9 persons that would be the ideal archetype of each planet. Not human persons, but a person somewhere. Because the planet is a person. That's
Or
the point.
you could say being if it's more comfortable for some people. I think you could say they're beings.
Well, actually, I prefer to challenge them with person.
I know you do.
And the result is, I have in my hand the Navagraha poem. I'll just read a few verses. And if you want more, you can get in touch with me. But because I'm a poet, I'm just going to read you 6 verses, 3-line verses, and you'll see what I'm doing. Om, the Navagrahas hold our world together. The fire, wind, and water that we call weather. From deepest caves to the farthest regions nether. All are threads in the fabric that they weave. In spite of what we think or may believe, cause and effect return before they leave. Janardana, Sri Vishnu, holds the scale, the mast of every ship that lifts its sail, while we create the winds that will prevail. The chariot we build and every horse we train awaits our command to know the course. But the grahas hold the map of joy or remorse. So until we yield the reins to Bhagavan, until the illusion of who we are is gone, the Navagrahas force us to keep on moving on. They are the avatars of the Vishnu avatars, celestial guardians moving across the stars, directing the traffic of these bodies that are our cars. In order to get karma, you need a car. This is the vehicle that we're in. The devas are like us, but they have been there, done that, got the merit badge for being human. But they succeeded in aligning themselves with universal principles, so they got to flip body and now be in a body that doesn't get karma or make karma, but facilitates matter or prakriti in its cause and effect processes. So you could call them the science beings. Behind everything that happens in a particular way are beings making it happen in a particular way. Devas and Devis. The grahas are the ultimate cause and effect devas and dehis for the humans experiencing the human body in that lifetime. So the more you go into this as a science, first, the less you make predictions, because now you just decided what karma the person would get, and you'll take it with them, called taking their karma. Secondly, you'll realize that what's happening on scale is happening very purposefully, that we're actually not in a universe, we're in a university. That's where we are. Welcome to Evolve You, the university where you get a chance to decide who you'll be next. And until you really know that and really believe that, then you'll flail about just following your impulses and being like who you associate with. So the other rule is whatever you associate with, you become like. Unless inside you're being like something else in a more powerful way, then you don't switch over to that one. You stay on the one that you're designating. This is why yoga cures karma. It doesn't make the past karma go away, but it does put you in a state of consciousness where you won't develop more negative cause and effect for your future.
It really seems to me, Jeffrey, after you listening to just what you've just said and watching so many clients come through our doors, that most people are, unless they're actually consciously on a yogic path, are trapped in society's perpetuation of karma. Just even in the day-to-day gossip, in the day-to-day affiliations, in the philosophy of family is everything. They're entrenched in family, pets, all of this entrapment, really. And until you can get rid of these attachments, I mean, I guess that's why it's called samsara, the wheel. You feel like you start to see it. But had I not heard this knowledge, I couldn't have seen it. I would have thought it's just normal. That's what life is. This is what we do. You get married, you have kids, we go blah, 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 and it just goes on and on and on. I would never have seen the potential of moksha had it not been for gurus from India and this perspective. And I don't think if I hadn't seen these thousands and thousands of charts that you've done with my own eyes, I would also have found that this philosophy or Jyotish was just, I don't know what to say, just impossible. You know what I mean? It wouldn't have seemed a science, let's put it that way. And now I've talked to so many astrologers, and you can talk to 10 astrologers and they'll see the planets configured this way, and all 10 of them will say this is going to happen for that configuration. I mean, it's like a computer science. It's phenomenal. And I don't know what to say. It's just hard to believe when you haven't seen it.
Jyoti, the science of light.
Give us an upaya. Let's get back to upayas because everybody wants to know how to get out of it. So, for example, I've heard you often say that if someone has a gentle Mars, and I know you don't call them exalted and strong, weak, or because that's not really. You have to say if a planet isn't in its strongest place, it doesn't mean it's in a negative place just because it's in a weaker place. It just means it's good for something. In other words, I've often heard you say that a weaker Mars is good for a diplomat. You don't want an aggressive person being a diplomat. So for example, Mars, what is the upaya for Mars? And then give us one for Saturn and one for Jupiter or whatever one you like, just so that we see the qualities of those planets once we recognize them in ourselves, and how can we improve our karma by knowing this knowledge?
That's a great question. So let's say that the first step of this as a process is, instead of just seeing events happening, you see planets talking. Because the whole point is that everyone thinks it's that are doing everything. They don't understand that the grahas are behind everything.
Mm.
And so in order to have a different outcome and a different experience, we have to have a different relationship with the persons who are causing everything. I'm sure you've had experiences like this. If you get a job in a large organization like a huge department store, you used to go there only as a customer. And you would buy things and you were subject to the rules of customers. But if you get a job there, then immediately it's no longer fun to shop there in the way that it was before. Because now you're responsible for everything that you do, and you're being watched. And you're now the voice of the department store. You're not the voice of you. When the person comes in, they don't want you to tell them about you. They want you to tell them about it. So now just multiply that. What if you're the president of a country? Just imagine, and we all know this, you've heard it often, as taking karma. So as soon as you make progress in the karma game, then you become powerful enough to decide things in ways that other people are incapable of, because they don't know the game. Just like go to a gambling casino, there you really can see it. Inside workers at the casino know how to tell who's cheating. They're given courses in who's cheating at what game of cards, blackjack or this or that or dice or this, and they learn to see it. So just imagine that the entire universe that we're living in is being run by rules. And those rules are enforced by devas and devis. And the beings who go against those rules become asura. Sura means the light. And asura is against the organized, enlightened procedures. And so eventually they become so dedicated to that they get angry at what is trying to tell them what to do. And then instead of this, they do this. They say, I don't want to follow your rules. We can do that. Animals cannot. And this is what's so interesting about us, is we can look the devas in the eye and say, I defy the laws of nature. I want to do it this way, or that way, or that way. Now, part of that is because where we're from, there are not material laws of nature. But it's also partly because, and here's a big secret, in order to come here, we have to get to the point that we want to be in control of here, because this is what matter teaches us. This pen never picks me up. I always pick the pen up. So I get a kick out of it because the pen does what I say. The pen can't take revenge because it doesn't have volition. But if I was holding you like this and doing whatever I want and playing with you and making you say whatever I want, what if that, isn't that called your corporation's president? That they temporarily own you and tell you what to say and tell you how to say it and tell you what to do. Say, if you do what I say, I'll give you more money. Okay, but is there karma involved? Depends on what they're selling, isn't it? If it's drugs and you're getting people addicted, or alcohol and you're getting people drunk, the cause and effect of that, who invents that? And what is it in us that would induce us to do something like that? And do we know, are we yogis? Do we know about karma? Or do we know and not even care? Because I'm just about me. So all these things that we observe in human beings, you can't see those in animals. They don't have that self-awareness, and they can't get that deeply in trouble for choosing, and they can't develop a personal relationship with a planet. Now, we didn't talk about this. But a mantra is the phone number for a reality. And the planets have mantras also. In fact, my guru of astrology had me chant each mantra to each graha. And he had me do each one 10,000 times. And I had to just stay focused on that. Because whatever you associate with, you become like. Like becomes like. What you like, you become like. And I'm all like, like I'm like. That's why that word's gone crazy. Because that's what the realm of Prakriti is. It's the place where you become like what you associate with. And there's two ways to do that. One is externally, and then one is what is your internal consciousness while you do external things. And then the third is what is the consequence of the external thing, no matter what you think. So you get involved with the devas and devis, and you start to become more aware of the rule-based system that's here. It's called the law of gravity, isn't it? Show me how to deny it. And yet, each of the grahas, that's gravity, graha. They create the reality because they're in charge of that department. And guess what? If you wanted to, you could stick around, and in another lifetime, you could be a graha. Now, just think how this opens the possibilities, what I'm saying. I'm saying it on purpose. So you see that if you really want to leave, that's called moksha. So you have to behave a particular way and say, alert, alert, this Atma is done. There's nothing else here I want. Now, if you say that and chase after things, you won't be believed. So what is moksha? Moksha is when you're done. Been there, done that, got the merit badge. I'm out. Ready. I'll do it your way. So the first step is to do it in the way the devas are doing it, and then to find out who's deva, and that's Vishnu. Brahma, Saraswati, Shiva, Durga, Vishnu, Lakshmi, because they're running the whole show. And then beyond them is Sri Bhagavan. So who are you talking to every day? Who are you associating with every day? What do you want from them? What should you want from them? And the yogic answer is to be in their service and to do what they want. And the higher you go in the hierarchy, the more interesting that becomes. And a real guru is somebody who doesn't have separate desires from Bhagavan. Zero. They're just here as the extension of Sri Bhagavan. And that's called stepping out of karma. If you talk to a planet, the planet is a Jiva Atma like we are, but they're in a special birth. So you could like a particular planet because you want to try that, because you haven't been a planet. You've only been a human and an animal and an amoeba. The more you think about this, the more you get the scale and scope of it. The more you start talking all the time to your funny little friends in Devaloka and to the ultimate supreme being in a variety of ways. And that is the culmination of yoga. Yoga takes us beyond karma. We're still subject to...
I was just going to say that was a great conclusion, and it's certainly good that you showed us the path out. But to get back to the question for all us people in the terrestrial world on here, if you don't have a strong planet, can you give us some upayas to the specific planets? Can you give it you started to tell us how to recognize the planets, and then you drifted off into a transcendental conversation. So I'm going to bring you back. For example, if you don't have a strong Mars, what is the remedy? If you don't have a strong Saturn, what is the remedy? And there's a good question in the chat box, which I'll ask you after you've given us some generalities of, you started to say you learn how these planets talk and sound when they're embodied in you. I know years ago in classes you taught us how to recognize how the planet speaks and how it sounds, but we really can't go into too much of that today. But perhaps just give us an idea how to
Well, it's-
recognize, for example, if somebody doesn't have a strong Venus, there's a good one. That's a very popular one. How do we recognize that? And what is the remedy to improve that if that is what their challenge is this lifetime?
well, you keep changing planets. I'd
Well,
switched.
whatever one. It doesn't matter which
No,
one.
no,
I
I'm
just
just
picked
kidding.
Venus because it's such a popular one.
Yeah, I understand.
It's
Well,
more
maybe we'll do
fun than the Mars.
we'll do Mars first and end with Venus. How's that?
All right, there we go.
So, because that's what this planet's poem is all about. It's a succinct description, less than one-page description of the essence of the planet. So here we go, and the planet Mars is called Managalaya. Om, courageous Managalaya protector, focused, intent, strategic, a skillful director, compelling, champion, energetic competitor, Bhumi Putra, child of the earth, Angarika, child of the earth, here to clash, to collide, and compel this birth, standing the field of battle and proving your worth. You are the fighter, combative with weapons and skill. Action speaks louder than words, and so your will drives you relentlessly to victory in battle. O Mars, horses and cars do as you command. Protector of women, so oh, how they love your hand. When all run or bow, you die with the sword in your hand. The troops of Kartikeya, you stand at the ready, unyielding and shielding the gentle, you always stand steady. Focused on what must be done, not theories heady. O flame of life, you burn in the belly and loins. You gamble not caring for approval, praise, or coins. And honor is the only club Managalaya joins.
Hmm.
And
All
in that,
strong characters.
you hear the essence that now if you see someone who's like that, who's any challenge, they'll take it. Don't bully people, protect them, etc., etc. You're watching Mars, Managalaya. And this is where Jyotish comes in. When a Jyotishi looks at the world, they don't see the person's projection of who they are. That's something they're making up. They see the category that the person is helplessly in. And that's
Say that again. Say that again.
yes, they don't see what the person is claiming to be or projecting.
Right.
She sees which planet they're actually the ambassador of.
Ah, okay.
And you can see, and in a few minutes, tell them which planet is strong and not,
Mm-hmm.
just by the various symptoms of their behavior. So let's listen to Shukra in juxtaposition to Mars, same length, Shukra. So what we're learning to do is see these and go, ah, I see. Oh, so that's, so that person has Mars mixed or mixed up with, or this or that. You have the names and the behavior patterns. So here's
And
Venus.
Sukra is in English, so people know.
Shukra is Venus. Shukra. Shukra. Om, Venus, Shukra, ambassador, strategic, polite, courteous, artful, refined, and active at night. Asura Guru, a Brahmin, yet opposed to the light, clever, proportionate, contriving, the keeper of style, conniving, discreet, envoy of cunning and wile, opportunistic, gracious, intriguing with a smile, astute, crafty, diplomatic, scheming, and sly, wily, subtle, shrewd, pretending to be shy, elegant emissary, unwilling to die, refined and congenial, keeper of harmony, intrigued by affection and sexuality, addicted to pleasure, gossip, and ecstasy, go-between, psychologist, marketing emissary, public relations suave linguist, intermediary, playing the field, even if you appear to marry, wearing a mask, always subtle and scheming, symmetrical, visual, illusionary, discreet, and dreaming, empty within, but the surface is always gleaming.
It's always
Gleaming.
gleaming.
So,
I resemble those remarks.
yes, indeed. As you can see, someone whose chart is ruled by Venus, their hand will be going up during that poem. If you're kick-ass martial artist, protector, etc., 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 your hand will go up for that one. And that's how you find out what planet rules your chart. And there are 9 of them. And there's one of them that you're more like than the rest. And you can't deny it. That's because you only think you're in charge, but actually it's you driving the vehicle that you asked for in previous lives. And it has those characteristics in this life. And if you want to learn how to be like a planet that you can't do yet, that's called upaya. And this is what a Jyotishi like myself helps people to understand which planet is their self-undoing and how to take activities that will strengthen that particular muscle. So think of each of the 9 grahas as a particular set of muscles and abilities. And the whole point of knowing this knowledge is to not call that me. It's my abilities.
We were talking earlier today, Jeffrey, about women with strong Mars. You'll know who you are. Often find that if they don't partner with a strong Mars male person, they have no respect for their partner.
Absolutely.
So it's important that Mars is one of those planets where you need a little pushback, I guess. Or the other problem you'll see in a relationship is a man has a really strong Mars, a woman has a weaker Mars. She likes the strong Mars because he's protective and he takes care of things. But 5 years later into the marriage, he's now her abuser because he's tired of her being afraid of everything. She doesn't handle everything. He has to do everything. And he starts getting impatient or violent. And you can just practically see that coming.
And imagine that's well said, Sandy, that each planet is a collection of qualities. But depending on how the planet's situated in a chart, the juxtaposition of what house it's in. So now we go from just the nature of the planet to the house, which is the department of activity on the planet Earth. Just think of it as divided into 12 departments. And those are divisions of the sky, otherwise known as houses. And when you're born, you have a planet in a house and in a sign. So it's in a position in the sky that puts it with certain stars. That's the sign it's in. It's in a particular place in the sky. That's the house it's in. And so then it's associated with or on a certain angle with other planets and stars. And that causes an expansion of and multiplication of certain characteristics and cancels certain others and makes a strange mix of others. So after a while, when you look, you're like a professional photographer. You see what the light is going to distort. You see over here, it's not clear, it's hazy. Over here, it's that. If you put this with this and that with that, that'll work. And just as Sandy built a scenario for a relationship that has strengths and weaknesses. And so if you understood all the grahas and their rashis and their relations and what the person has to do and what they have the option of doing, then you would understand compatibility.
Very often, Jeffrey, I mean, that is usually when people ask, especially if it's a woman, she'll say, she'll ask the relationship question. Perhaps she's older, let's say over 25, because usually, it seems to be the age people think they should be married by. So let's say a woman over 25 comes to you and you see that she has relationship issues in the chart, or as you often say, relationship is difficult. That would either mean late marriage or marriage and divorce, or marriage doesn't happen, or it's complicated. Is there any remedy for that? I mean, can that be changed? What would a person have to do to fix a relationship house?
The planet I was going to discuss next fits in quite nicely with that. And the term is upaya. What's the remedy for any imbalance that might be in our chart? How do we compensate? Or what other planet helps us? And so it is that planets are friends or enemies with each other. For example, the Sun, Mars, and Jupiter are all friends. Now, if you drop Saturn in there, or Rahu, then you now have three friends and there's something agitating what would have been a harmonious situation, because this one also has a voice. And so then all the possible combinations of the planets and their abilities and tendencies for their degrees of strength, and the house they're in, which is the area of life they're a specialist in, all of these different material things have been divided up with Jyotish into departments, compartments, a planet in the early degrees of a sign. It even goes down to degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So each sign is 30 degrees. And at the 31st, at the 29th degree, it's this strength. At the 20th, it's this. At the 15th, it's this. At the 2nd, it's that. And so this is the precise description of the cause and effect and its driving forces inside a chart. So I just want to read one more to you. This is Brihaspati. Now I want you to imagine Venus is very fond, as you could see, of artistry, aesthetics, being beautiful, being elegant, being polite, things like that. Whereas Mars was, don't mess with Bill, do the following, let's get this accomplished, come on and do this, in varying degrees from very rude and bossy to very sophisticated and talented in being strong but not brutal. And these are the different degrees of the sign and the different planets that are with. But let's just do Jupiter for a moment. It's Brihaspati, the one who's spouting the truth all the time. Om Brihaspati, immortal spout of Brahman, you hold the keys to what it means to be human. You carry the immortal light that alone can illumine. Seer of all, you are the original Rishi. You see the mantras you hear, and they give you drishti, vision. Morality, perspicacity, legality, immortality, heavy with wisdom and vidya, you are the guru. Gravity, gravitas, judicial, all these are you. Thoughtful, upright, unselfish, discerning and true, enlightened, conclusive, profound, clear-sighted acharya, noble, unbending, compassionate, the ultimate arya, erudite, truthful, and servant of the avatara. O Guru, you are the intermediary, divine, teaching all the yoga of how to realign our true selves with beauty's original design. O Jupiter, Graha Raja, and moon and sun, the moon and sun bow to you and shine upon everyone, for you lead us home when this journey of learning is done.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see with each of these planets, at first you'll be compelled to be some version of them if that planet's strong. If you have Venus strong, you'll be one way, Mars another way. But what if your Jupiter is also strong? So Mars and Venus are younger planets. The muscle bound are more muscle bound at 25 than at 75, almost universally. The beautiful in the feminine form, male or female, are less elegant 50 years later. So Venus and Mars only give their benefit for a certain amount of time. And then you have to have a subtle benefit that's their essence, but not their external essence.
So it's better to be running a Venus Dasha when you're younger than when you're 80.
Exactly. And Jupiter, Brihaspati, is Guru. And so when Guru becomes perfected, the other planets don't take precedence over it.
Hmm.
And then that becomes truth-telling. So if you looked at someone's chart and you saw that they had a strong Mars and a strong Venus, you'd ask questions about how much they have that in control. But if they have a strong Jupiter, you would know for sure. They won't lie to you about it. They'll tell you the truth, and they will manage those powerful drives from both Venus and Mars with Jupiter. If they don't have that Jupiter, could be trouble because they don't have a wise elder inside themselves keeping those young planets, Mars and Venus, in check. So with this knowledge, you just see and when you look at a scene, you see multiple levels of reality. You see 9 planets in each person functioning in each scene. And this is what the Devas see also. They're creating it, they see it. And that's what each of these is. It's a purposeful division of unconscious matter into functional departments that are causing everything here to manifest. And Jyotish is the bridge that you go across on the way to yoga because you see everything as it actually is. You can name it, you can describe it in detail. And this means you're no longer calling it you. You're now able to see that you're wearing it, just like anything we're wearing. I'm not purple. This is purple. If you don't know purple and green and blue and yellow and white and how they go together, then it won't make sense. So think of Jyotish as exactly that. And finally, it's the sun shining in your heart.
So to get back to my question, what would somebody do for upaya if they have a problem relationship house?
With what? House?
Yeah, if their relationship house was damaged,
Ah.
what would the upaya be for that person this lifetime? Like, how could they change it? I mean,
Yes.
they have, what do they have to work on to change it?
Well, it's obvious, isn't it, that they could take a course in it because then they associate with it in its theoretical but practical form. And this is what we call education, where we don't have a natural gift yet for a particular department. I can tell you personally, I took several mathematics courses because mathematics was my least favorite subject. And so I purposely went as far as algebra and geometry. But calculus, I just didn't want to know that much. So I never went that far. If I had pushed myself, my chart would also determine whether I even have the raw material of truly doing that. And that's the other part that you can know through the blueprint of the chart, is whether the person actually has the substance that would be a wise thing for them to do, or that
I think
they
that's
could.
one of the reasons why children's charts are so valuable to have, because you are looking at the raw material at birth and how it develops, and you also see the karma of who their parents are, their parents, and how their life will unfold. And I can't help but remember the young fellow who wrote back from college. He wrote a long, like a 10-page letter when I first met Jeffrey, and he started out the letter saying, my hippie mother, who had 5 kids, had all of our charts done, and he was 5 years old at the time. And when he was visiting her on home from university, she pulled out a cassette, and he listened to this cassette on the drive home. And in the cassette, it told this fellow, Jeffrey Armstrong, repeated his entire life to him, including what classes he was going to be taking in university. And he went on to say that he thought his mother was a loony bin, but after hearing this reading, he went on to study Jyotish himself. So I thought that was kind of funny. And there's
Welcome.
another interesting chart we had a few years back. One of Jeffrey's professional colleagues, who was the head of a university department in a very prestigious university, was not a fan. He was an Indian fellow, not a fan of Jyotish, because even in India, there's so many charlatans and what have you that astrology has gotten a very bad name. And so, being a scientist that he didn't think very much of astrology. He liked Jeffrey, but he again couldn't understand why Jeffrey would be such an avid Jyotish, considering how smart he was in all the other departments. And so Jeffrey, in the way how Jeffrey is, he says, well, I'll do your chart for you. So he studied his chart and came back to him next week. I'm not going to mention names, and Jeffrey's probably forgotten who this is, but I remember it vividly because it was such a shocking outcome for this fellow. So Jeffrey does the chart, and in one of the things in the chart, he says to this professor, is that you're going to be changing your career very soon. Now, this guy's at the top of his game, and no one would have suspected that he'd be changing his career. But it turned out that he was in negotiations with the university to terminate, and nobody knew it. He hadn't told anybody, and here it is, Jeffrey is telling him that this is going to be happening. And sure enough, a few weeks later, the negotiations were done, and he was now head at another university. So he's kind of turned it around, and he jokes about, I hear him online once in a while, joke about Jeffrey and his Jyotish and how he is now turned around about it. But he was about as skeptical as it comes. And speaking of skeptics, for anybody, I'm sure everybody on line today has seen Jeffrey's challenge from Michael Shermer. So for anybody who's listening to this after, go to YouTube and type in Jeffrey Armstrong, skeptic Michael Shermer, and it's on Fox TV. Jeffrey was tested, and he was tested to do 10 charts, sight unseen. He had 2 minutes, I think, to say 20 things about each person. And I always say to people, if you think that's not hard, say 20 things about your spouse that can only be answered in yes or no in a minute or 2 minutes, and see if you can do that. So imagine doing that for strangers. So anyway, he scored 79% accuracy, and I won't tell you what happened, but there's a little fun thing that happens at the end. And Jeffrey, to this day, is the only person who has ever beat Michael Shermer, the skeptic. And so it's quite a challenge, and it's truly a science and a real gift of India. And it's just like somebody lets you into into the secrets of the universe, to know that your karma is hidden in your DNA and just evolves as time goes on, and someone can just look at that blueprint and say, yep. I mean, I've even seen people say, oh yes, on next week on Tuesday, you're going to get a letter. I mean, how the heck do they know that? I mean, it's just phenomenal. That's how precise it can get. Jeffrey, any closing words? We've got one more question in here. You want to take one more question? It's a bit personal for somebody, but she's asked it, so I'm gonna ask you, and you can say you don't want to answer it, but so the question is, where is it? Just let me get. Okay, if your chart says you are going to have complications with birth or pregnancy, does that mean every time there will be problems, or are there any remedies after the first time that can improve it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. In fact, even the first time you could improve it if that's possible, first of all. So we don't know the magnitude of the dilemma. But let's just say that Jyotish isn't saying it must happen. It's suggesting where and what might happen. And then according to the person's other resources that they have in their nature, other resources they have at their disposal, the free will that they might have to alter circumstance will vary and be different. And even their capability of doing so is sometimes a fixed asset. But if you can convince them to not be stuck in a particular pattern, then they might even be able to go beyond that. So I don't tell people what to do, but I do tell them where they're stuck when I do a reading and help them see that. But then they still have to decide, okay, what do I do about that? They could hire an expert then if it was something they need to learn. If it was something they need to do, they can finally see that they have a natural blockage in that area that they've had for a long time, and they call that self. So there's a variety of ways you can change a pattern or suggest a change of pattern without telling the person what to do. And this is a fine, refined science. So when you talk about the situation, that's exactly how careful you are. You do show them different pathways, but you don't tell them which one to take.
I remember early, even Jeffrey, before I met you, you actually said the same thing to me, but I had somebody tell me, you don't have children in your chart. You won't have children. And I remember saying, yeah, well, I don't want children. And they said, no, you won't have children. And the point I got years later wasn't just the fact that they said I wouldn't have children. It was that my mindset was that I didn't want children from a very young age. So that was my karma it was in my mind from a much younger stage. It wasn't even something I wanted to do. So that was like a karma embedded, and it's in my chart very plain. Jeffrey was the second person to tell me that. So there you go. Some people get them, some people don't. Meant to be a yogi this lifetime. I think another thing too, if someone knows they're going to have trouble in a certain area, like you often use the example of someone, you said it a little bit earlier, if they don't have math skills and they can't balance their checkbooks, then you please go and do some accounting classes or go learn a little bit about that, how to manage your money. That is a life skill everybody needs to know. And the fact you don't want to do it is in your mind. It's a limitation that you need to do something about and to move it forward. That is something important, or same as Mars. If you don't have a strong Mars, it's very difficult to handle confrontation, and you do need to take some negotiating skills or some sort of martial arts or something that gets you out of the repetitive victim consciousness. So there's lots of things that can be done for upaya. And quite often, Jeffrey may suggest a mantra if the person is in that consciousness. If they're a yogi and they know mantras work, they can do that. And if they're not, then there's different upayas at whatever level that you're at. And those are things, it's like circles within circles within circles. And I remember, Jeffrey, you saying years ago when we were doing a lot of ultimate relationship work, and people who were aggressive confuse their aggressiveness with them having a strong Mars, when quite often it was fearful. They were fear, and it's like a chihuahua, who's fearful, and so it looks aggressive. And I remember you saying, okay, from a scale of 1 to 1,000, how strong is your Mars? And you'd say, Bruce Lee being 900, where are you on that scale? And it sort of puts things in perspective because 1 to 1,000, where are you on that scale? And Jyotish, as Jeffrey alluded to earlier, can see those minute scales of where you are, how much of the Venus you have, how much of Jupiter you have, how much of Mars. And as I said earlier, find out what your Achilles heel is in the chart and work on it this lifetime, or guess what? We'll see you next time. Okay, somebody says, what if you have a lot of Mars in your chart? Yeah, could tell you lots of stories about that one.
Oh, yeah. But what you can know for sure is that if a situation takes place where the innocent are being harmed, Mars will not put up with it. So there are certain behaviors that a strong planet will certainly just not put up with. So if somebody's being bullied, even if they don't know them, someone with a strong Mars will walk up to the bully and say, hey, you, what are you doing? Do you really understand what's happening? And take them out of the mood that they're in. Why? Because the person with a strong Mars is not afraid. But because of that, they don't come charging up and just hit the person. And they don't just start yelling at them or in some kind of stupid way. Instead, they're subtle. They have a strategy. They make a little push. And they're essentially saying, you want to push me? I'm not saying you have to, but here, what are you doing? And they go, who are you to ask? And there we go. And now, if there's two strong Marses, then I'll say, come on, you can do better than that. You know who you really are. It belittles you.
Don't forget, each one is in a guna. So there's Mars Sattva, Mars Tamasic, and Mars Rajasic. So you can hear it in their voice where they are. So avoid the Tamasic ones, and Rajas is a powerful Mars, and Sattvic, as Jeffrey just pointed out, will kind of bring everybody back into balance. They make great leaders, the strong silent type. They don't have to be loud and aggressive. But a Mars and a woman is difficult for men to manage. Strong women, powerful women are intimidating to a lot of men. So that is a problem in today's world, because so many more women are out there bringing up their Mars. They're doing the things that they never got to do. They're better at it than a lot of men. So it is causing a bit of a social problem.
Of course. And matter of fact, we use the word way too much, mankind.
Mm-hmm.
I correct them every time. I say, listen, grow up.
We need a little kindness.
It's humankind. And not only are you not being human, you're not being kind. And I'll push on them a little bit, just because I know that they're demonstrating those negative characteristics that go from, and this is where the gunas come in. Sattva, there's a style of doing things that is the least violent, the least harmful, but the most truthful. And then it's a gradient all the way down Mars to kick ass, take names, to be dangerous. And then all the way down. And so once you learn this gradient and learn how to be in the midst of it, then you learn how to become a different person of the many people you can be for different situations. Interestingly enough, once you know Jyotish, you do play acting because you're testing the waters and you're managing the situation so it doesn't cause harm. Whereas other people are just compelled to be something and they can't help it. And in a little bit of time, you'll know that. And you can't always talk to them. I'm going to end with one more planet, just so that you know about it.
Can we take one more question before you do that, so we stay on the topic?
Absolutely.
So there's a question here. How do you know which guna the planet is in? What you said about Mars being Tamasic, Rajasic, or Sattvic, I know, and this person says, I know Saturn is more naturally in the Tamasic guna, but how would it go to Sattva?
Well, actually, that's a mistaken understanding. No planet is just Tamasic. They are the whole range of Sattvic to Tamasic depending upon various factors on the planet's positioning, what house it's in, the sign, the ruler of the planet, and then what sign it's in and in what house. So you don't know automatically. And that's the part where it's
Complicated.
it's complicated, and you develop an insightfulness, which I was just about to actually tell you about. The planet, just as you thought Rahu has to be negative. Well, not really. And Saturn is matter. So some matter is sattvic, some is rajasic, some is tamasic. Granted, a tamasic Saturn is a problem, but a rajasic Saturn is a builder, and a sattvic Saturn is a benevolent billionaire who's doing great things in the world with their billions. So you have to be careful not to get stereotypical and just one-sided.
So Jeffrey, just so she doesn't get beaten up too much here, she's reminding us that we actually did call Saturn Tamasic in the card deck.
By comparison, that's partially true.
Because it's material, I would say, right?
Yeah, because Saturn is in charge of matter in that sense, but Tamasic does require more explanation. But her point is well taken. You have to be careful with English because it doesn't have equivalent words. So if you don't have time to say a multiple of words and weave a subtle web of meaning, then it doesn't reveal the entire meaning at any given point. So it's a point well taken.
Yeah, multiple levels, Marissa. It's a place to start, and it would be influenced by everything else in the chart. So wheels upon wheels. Continue, Jeffrey, with your poem.
In this case, this is K2. K2 is an interesting planet and not as much understood by our civilization, because K2 is the living within matter without being attached to it. So think of yourself as an undercover agent. You're here, but you're not attached. And Rahu, what Rahu is known for, at whatever guna, sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic, it's attached to matter, it's associated with matter, and it defines itself as matter. Whereas K2 is just the opposite. K2 is not from here, not staying here, on its way out. So here's K2. Om K2, you are enigmatic and a mystic, cryptic, telepathic, and eccentric. Seeing all, you are psychic and esoteric. You live in a cave deep underground, freedom-loving, the human spirit unbound. All day and night you live on sacred sound. Mysterious, your treasures are locked in secrecy. Your home is where you are in mendicancy, and the treasure in your heart is privacy. Om, dragon's tail. That's K2. The world thinks you are insane because you constantly dwell upon the arcane until your words remove their mortal chain. Inspiration, the fruit of renunciation. So humble, no one expects emancipation. O keeper of the gate to liberation, you see the devas, so your words are enigmatic, esoteric, cryptic, and telekinetic. And you know our secrets because you are telepathic. Now, my question to you is, do I have a strong K2? How about it's with my Sun and Mars in the 12th house, which is moksha? Yes. So some people, as a strand that weaves through their life, are a particular planet over and over and over again in different ways. 5 years in an ashram, studied Sanskrit, studied Jyotish, detached, renounced, esoteric, etc., etc. So after a while, you can almost smell, in a positive sense, like a fragrance, a particular planet playing in the background. And you can feel that something is of that nature is there. And with Ketu, Ketu is ready to not be here. The rest of the chart determines whether they are. But if Ketu alone is strong, bye. See y'all later. They'll come visit sometime. But otherwise, they're here and not here. And so just think of it this way, is that each of these is an endowment up to a certain amount. Because my Ketu is in Mars, Ketu is known as the other Mars. It's in Mars's sign, Scorpio. And where is it sitting? In the 12th house. And with what planet? The sun. So am I Ketu a little bit? That's what I am this lifetime, mostly. But I have other planets. I have a strong Venus, so I'm a poet, and so I've done albums of song. So you solidify having a particular planet. You can identify it, make a case for it, show where it is. Then there may be another one that's a contradiction to that one, and two others, and they make a blend that you now have to learn to describe to help that person understand the particular combination of karmas that they're wearing. And this is where it's such a brilliant science and so elegant. And where it helps you to build organizations, to build relationships, to build families, to care for children, to watch developing situations. So many different elegant and helpful things. What we do not do in the Vedic astrology is manipulate it and use it for our personal gain. We know better because we know what karma is. Goes around, comes around. And so you can know all of this and not misuse it. And by the way, that's Ketu also.
I think one of the things that we're going to talk about at the retreat as well this summer is how to use some of these endowments for better relationship. In other words, there's compatible where you're the similar. You have to have enough similar things to have a long-term relationship. But you also have to value the things that you're opposites in. And rather than get annoyed with these opposites, reframe it in your mind so that these are strengths of the partnership. How can how can one person enhance the partnership? And I guess if you don't have level 4 and level 5 compatibilities, which we talk about in our ultimate relationship seminar, you'll get annoyed. You'll just say, oh, don't do that again. I don't like the way you never clean up your room, or I don't like this, or I don't like this, or you're always nagging at me. You can just hear these arguments that come up because it's your planets that are grating on each other. And when you start to see that it's just a planet grating, it takes the pressure off, especially if you come together because you love each other. The love has got to outweigh the planets grating on each other. And if you've got level 4 and level 5 compatibilities, then you have a higher purpose in your relationship. These little things are just little things. It's like I often say to Jeffrey, believe me, he's got 10% that makes me crazy. But you know what? The other 80, 90%, I wouldn't give up for the world. So, it's not always 100%. But if I got 80% in a relationship, I think I'm probably 40% higher than most. So, Jeffrey G., all your little annoyances are just little love taps. Isn't that what said? Didn't Bhishma say when Krishna fired the arrows at him? Didn't Bhishma say they're just kisses from Krishna or something like that?
Yes.
Even though he was filled with arrows.
Yeah. I'd rather be filled with arrows by Bhagavan than anyone else.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
And the other thing I always love about that is Saturn. If you're a yogi, they say, whoever they are, other yogis, that when Saturn comes visiting, if you listen and you serve the devas and you serve your guru, Saturn just hits you, pokes you with a pin. But if you're not doing it, he hits you with a 2x4 just to get you to listen. So Geza asked a good question here, which kind of triggered that little reminder to me. He said, if we are in communication and service to the devas and devis in general, i.e. Ganesha, does that seva extend to the grahas? And can that upaya alter or reduce any new karmas we may be making?
The real secret here is whether or not the person has gotten past the compulsive need to be what they think is themselves. And this is what ashram training teaches you. The safest way to do this is to go into an ashram for X amount of time, because you practice, as I did for 5 years, having nothing that you want. Imagine 5 years, and maybe 1% of the time you had what you would have chosen. And the rest of the time, you're just there learning. So the whole idea in the yogic training is that we're not the body and we're not the manas. We're actually neither. And when we get to a point that we truly realize that, we don't reincarnate. But that may not happen in just one lifetime. So we don't panic and we don't get angry and we don't fight against it. It's a gradual process of evolutionary understanding and evolvement and perfection. And we just keep at it until. So with that, one more poem, and it's the introduction to the poem, the Navagraha poem. Om, the Navagrahas hold our world together. The fire, wind, and water we call weather. From deepest caves to the farthest regions nether, all are threads in the fabric that they weave. In spite of what we think or may believe, cause and effect return before they leave. Janardana, Sri Vishnu, holds the scale, the mast of every ship that lifts its sail, while we create the winds that will prevail. The chariot we build and every horse we train awaits our command to know the course. But the grahas hold the map to joy or remorse. So until we yield the reins to Bhagavan, until the illusion of who we are is gone, the Navagrahas force us to keep moving on. They are the avatars of the Vishnu avatars, celestial guardians moving across the stars, directing the traffic of these bodies, which are our cars. Goes around, comes around.
Mm.
And so, my beloveds, this is how you become immortal. You celebrate your birthday, but you live as an immortal. And Jyotish's recognition of this, but at the same time, the mantras keep you connected to what is beyond the grahas. That's called upaya. That's the secret. It must also not only give you knowledge of what's going on around you, but you mustn't manipulate that to control others, but instead use it for the sake of wisdom and for yourself. It's the evolutionary step when you could be ready to be done. But you don't ask for that. You put both hands up and say, whatever you'd like. That's the secret to moksha.